Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Christmas special of Sunday Night Live with me, Jonny Lipsham, here at Jonny Lipsham Studios in the sunny, well, not sunny because it's midnight now, but otherwise ordinarily sunny Scotland, where it has been freezing cold and thankfully is no longer freezing cold. The snow that we've had for the last 10 days is finally starting to melt away. And I didn't have my woolly hat or gloves or scarf on today. It was actually quite pleasant. It was above freezing for the first time in 2 weeks, which is pretty cool. But anyway, Merry Christmas, everybody, and also, I should say, Happy Hanukkah. It is the first night of Hanukkah, and I actually really love it when we get Hanukkah and Christmas rolling one into the other. On those occasions when that happens. So yeah, years like this are particularly cool. I enjoy them very, very much. Probably extra specially more than I ordinarily would. So a very happy Hanukkah and a Merry Christmas to everybody, to all of my subscribers, to all the people watching tonight, and also all the people that are going to be watching this on replay. I hope you all have a fantastic time over the coming couple of weeks, as we rapidly approach the end of 2022 and we start 2023, which is pretty exciting because we're coming towards the end of the first quarter of the 21st century, which is something. It's gone pretty fast, hasn't it? You know, when we think back, you know, it's going to be like 23 years ago since the start of the 21st century, and that's a pretty crazy thing to be talking about. So anyway, I thought I'd, you know, kind of put that thought in your heads so that now everybody feels incredibly old. But there we go. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming. We've only got 13 people just now, but hopefully hopefully I'll be able to complete a coherent sentence. But hopefully some more people will come on in, which would be cool. Now, just to give you the heads up, there will be no show next week. The reason being is that Christmas is on Sunday this year, so Sunday night would be on Christmas Day. So I don't want to do that to you guys, because I want to allow you guys to be able to spend the maximum amount of time with your family and your friends and enjoying Christmas together. So no show on Sunday next week. I did think about doing a show on Christmas Eve, but then I thought, meh, it's the same problem, really. You guys are going to be wanting to be getting ready for Christmas, so meh, no, probably not a good idea. So there will be no show on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day. I might move it to Boxing Day, but again, kind of similar kind of problem. So probably what we'll do is we will just do what we would do in the situation where we have Christmas on Sunday, which is there'll be no show at all, and we will have Songwriting Simplified as normal on the 28th with me and Jonny Guy. Hopefully Jonny will be able to make it, and then we will have a Hogmanay special. Hogmanay is kind of the Scots term for New Year's Eve. So that will be on the 31st, on Saturday the 31st. So if you guys are up for a little bit of early evening, beginning to get excited about the new year, then come and join me for a Hogmanay special on New Year's Eve. That would be very cool if you could do that. If you could join me just for an hour, would be great. And then you guys can go back to celebrating with your friends and your family, because for you in the United States, it'll be kind of like early evening. It'll be like 6 p.m., 7 p.m. or 8 or 9 p.m., depending where you are in the United States. But for me, I will already be in 2023. So the celebrations for me will have already begun. So if you guys are up for that, then we will do that. Please let me know in the comments below or in the chat if you guys are, ow, smack the microphone, or in the chat if you guys are up for that. Alright, so now that we've got that all out of the way, I'm going to see who is here. We've got 17 people here now, which is great. So let's go. We do have a question already, which is fantastic, which came from Just Bob. But I think who was first in the door? It's kind of hard to say because the chat has got jumbled up. I don't know why that's happened, but it has. But anyway, I think Billy was first in the door. I can't tell because the chat has somehow got jumbled up in order. I don't know why that's happened. But anyway, so we have Just Bob with the first question of the night. So if you have a question, then please do type at Jonny Lipsham Studios. That enables me to pick out your question from everything else and then ask your question. Because I'm happy for you guys to talk to each other in the chat. That's always a good thing. So yeah, just type at Jonny Lipsham Studios and then ask your question. And what that does is that highlights my name in red, and then I know that that is a question, and I can pick that out pretty easy. All right, so we have, as I say, we've got Just Bob, we've got Keith here from Canada, we've got Kyle Trusiak, we've got John Hawk, we've got John Lake, and we got Charlie Dillon as well. We got Sean Aaron, and Tony Stringer is here, which is great. And who else do we have? We have Bobby Booth, and Kyle was asking about the trumpet in the intro music. By the way, that was my arrangement of Silent Night that you heard at the start of the show, which I did years ago for my band. For a year that my band played at my local church's carol concert, and so that was the version of Silent Night that I came up with for that show. And who else do we have? We got Paul Morgan here. Apparently it's a nice day in Florida, which is nice. And we got Rich, aka My Personas, who is here as well. Don Oliver is here. And chat just jumped massively, which is always annoying. And Secret Squirrel is here as well. Johnny Gibe is here, which is fantastic. I have not made him a moderator, which is naughty me. So I'm going to add Johnny Gibe as a moderator. There you go, Johnny. You should now have a blue wrench. So you know what to do. You know, you just need to drop out and then come back in, and you should have the blue wrench. There you go, mate. You have earned that for sure. Let's see who else is here. Billy Morgan is here, and I think I've got everybody, which is cool. Alright, so let's get to the question that Bob had, which is, what is the auto scale function in Studio One? How does it work? Does it read chords of the song and randomly place scale notes into your music on a separate track? I'm not quite sure what you are referring to when you say auto scale, so I had to take a little bit of a guess. And that is that I think you're referring to the scale function inside the note editor. And what that does is when you set that to a particular scale, it effectively quantizes the notes to that scale. So if you're inserting notes, or if you're using one of the, like the generate random notes commands, it will only generate notes that fit that particular scale. So, for example, if you set it to C major and not C chromatic, then everything will be according to the C major scale. And so that can have uses, that can have benefits, and it just means that you're not going to necessarily input notes that aren't going to fit the scale of the key of your song. It's just a little easy way to help you get notes into your song. So yeah, that's kind of what that does. So let's go take a look at that in Studio One, actually, just so you can see what I'm talking about. So I think this is what you're talking about, Bob, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is what you're referring to here in this little side panel over here. And I just realized my webcam is not showing, so let's get that back on. There we go. There we go. Okay, so I am looking at the right thing. Good. All right, so you're talking about this thing here. So when you have this checked and the little keyboard highlights here. Now you notice that also the notes highlight here in the little keyboard that's on its side. So you've got a whole bunch of options here. These are all the scales that you have available to you. You've got triads, so you can basically limit Studio One to only using the notes of a C, in this case C major triad. So basically if you just randomly click notes in here, it will only input C major triad notes or C minor triads. And then you've got these other scales. You've got the major scale, you've got melodic minor, harmonic minor, natural minor, major pentatonic, minor pentatonic, blues, Dorian, Mixolydian, Phrygian. These are kind of like your most common scales. Unfortunately, it doesn't have a whole bunch of advanced scales, which I would like to see. It would be nice if it has some major modes there, like the Dorian and Mixolydian and Phrygian. It'd be nice if there was some other modes added as well, like Locrian, maybe, would be nice. A little bit of Locrian never goes amiss. And also, you know, maybe some minor mode scales as well, such as Lydian flat 2 or Locrian flat 2, or, you know, any of those would be cool to have, and would be useful, especially if you're writing modal music in particular. But the fact that you can limit it to blues scale is really handy. So let's just do a quick look at, let's limit this to C major. Now take a look at what is lit up here in the sideways on piano. See all the notes that have got a little blue stripe at the bottom here of each note. Those are the ones that are active, okay? So as you can see, we've got C, E, and G, and then in the next octave, C, E, and G, and if you were to carry on, it would be C, E, and G. So basically all the notes are limited to the C major triad. So as you can see, whilst I'm randomly clicking, like I was just there, it will only ever input a C major triad. So when we play that, all right. Now let's let's get rid of all of that. So let's just delete that event. We'll double click to create a new event. So this can be really useful, and then again you can do the same for a blues scale. Let's say you want to do some kind of improvisation. You're not really that good at improvisation, but you want to do something that's for example, that's probably going to sound terrible, but yeah, kind of does sound a bit terrible. But you see what I mean, is that it basically limits you to only these notes being active in the scale. I think it's pretty useful. And then of course you can change it to any of these other ones that you want. But these are essentially just basic useful scales. And of course you can change the key according to whatever key your song is in. So if it's in the key of G, then you can have it in G, and then whatever scale you want to use for your song. So it's useful, I think. Useful, it's helpful, it provides you with a deliberate limitation. And you know, for creating melodies, and you know, also, you know, you've got this as well. Somewhere in here is an option to fill with notes. There you go. Fill with notes, randomize notes. I don't know what that'll do, but there we go. So that's just added in a few extra notes. Let's see what that's like. Interesting. Interesting. So that added in a few extra notes that we hadn't actually entered in there. So that's pretty cool. And I could probably click that a few times. Let's see. Let's do fill with notes, 16th notes. No, let's just do 8th and 16th notes. All right, so you get the idea. Is, this can be useful if you're wanting to, kind of just create a sort of automatically generated little backing part or something like that. All right, so I hope that answers that question. That was a good one. I like that one. Let's see, what else do we have? So there you go. Johnny Guy has the blue wrench, and he's very happy about that, which is cool. Let's see. Kyle says it's like having the bumpers set up when you go bowling. Kind of like that, yes. Superstar says, apologies for doubling up on the questions. Naughty, naughty. One question per go. You know that. I'm kidding. I must ask 2 questions regarding funk. Okay. Question why? 1, must I be like that? 2, must I... Okay. I have no idea what you're talking about there. Yeah, I really don't know what you're talking about. Sorry about that. Okay, Just Bob says, I kind of thought it worked with the chord track, not as a safe, no bad note hit on keyboard draw in feature. Cool, if not a keyboard player. This is just one way in which you can do it. That's all I was saying, really, is just, this is just one application. As with most features of Studio One, there are several different applications. This is one. Certainly, you could probably use the chord track. I've never actually done that with this, but you could certainly use the chord track. But basically, it just allows you to input notes according to a certain scale, and you can change the lengths, and you can change the note value. You can have triplets, quintuplets, septuplets, which can provide interesting rhythmic variations. Whatever you might want to do, to be honest. And also, for entering chords, it could be interesting, particularly if you're writing a modal piece. Let's say you're doing something that's in Dorian mode, and you're happy making the melody in the Dorian scale. So let's say you have absolutely no problem making the melody in the scale, but you're not really sure what to do with chords, because you don't want to just like spend the whole song just on a D minor chord. So what are you going to do? Well, that's where this could come in handy. You could set it to Dorian scale, and then you could stack some chords, drawing those in. If you're not comfortable with kind of playing in different voicings on the keyboard, you could certainly draw those chords in, and you could get creative that way. And then, of course, you could use some of the different actions in the action menu to kind of, help create something that could be interesting for your part, depending upon the style of music that you're working in, obviously. Charlie Dillon says the chord select function works great when using the Atom SQ, which you use all the time. Well, that's cool. I do have an Atom SQ, but which was connected to my PC, but it's now connected to my Mac, because I kind of thought I'm not really using it because I've got these 2 keyboards. So why do I need the Atom SQ? So I put the Atom SQ over on this side, out of shot here on the Mac, which is great because when I'm doing stuff on the Mac, I've got a controller with which to input notes. So that's cool. Bob says he's going to play around with it. He's going to play around with the scale input feature. It's a very cool little feature, especially, like you say, if you're not really a keyboard player. All right, Mike is here from Music to Motion, which is awesome, and Alps Media, my awesome sponsor for Sunday Night Live, is here as well. So that's very, very cool. And I think I missed those people as they came in. All right, any other questions, folks? Otherwise, this will be a really short show. I'm assuming that since Charlie put a comma at the end of his post there, that maybe there is like a second part to that. I'm not really sure. Ronald Figueroa says, started a new project with an SMF Type 1. when I assigned impact to the drum track, it created a bunch of impact channels, but there's no tracks for those channels. Okay. Yeah, so here's the thing. I'm not 100% sure that this is what you're seeing, but when you have impact in when you add impact into a song for the first time, let's go and do that. Let's drag an impact and let's go and get my SSD5 mapped kit. It takes a second to load up. Now what you'll notice if I close that out and then if I open the console, you'll notice for the most part I only have just this one channel. Now you might not be seeing what I am seeing here. You might see, if I can get this to come open, there you go. You might see, hang on, let me just select a few of these. And then we'll there we go. So you might see something like this, where you just have one track in the event view, and then you have a whole bunch of these gray channels. Now, these gray channels are basically all the available channel assignments inside Impact. As you can see here, we've got 16 pads, right? Each one of these at the moment is assigned to channel 1, but I can change this. I can change this here to channel 2. I can change this one to channel 3. And seeing as this one is also snare drum, I'll have that one come out channel 3. And we'll do the same with this one. And then we will do we'll do the hi-hat first. So we'll have the hi-hat out of channel 4. And that's closed hi-hat. We'll do the same for open hi-hat, channel 4. And we'll do the same here. We'll make that one channel 4. And then toms. This is the low one, so we'll have this one coming out of 5. And then 6. And then 7. And then that will also be 7. And then this one will be 8. And then we've got some crashes and some rides and things here. So we'll make this one 9. We'll make this one 9 as well, because it's a crash symbol. And we'll make this one 10 because it's the ride symbol. So there you can see I've given each one of these a channel assignment. So if I now go back to the mixer view, there's not anything on channel 2. Why is that? What did I do there? Oh yeah, that's my room tap. Which is fine. So as you can see, all of these are now coming off different channels. Alright, so as you can see, each one of these is peaking according to what I play there. And I've got the hi-hats coming off the same channel. And there's my toms. There's my snare drum. And there's my kick drum. So yeah, these are all your different channels for impact. Now, that's useful in that now I can do a proper drum mix. I can do EQ, compression, whatever I need to do for this drum set. I can treat this like it's a real actual acoustic drum set. And then up here, I can just have the one channel for the drums. And treat this like a drum bus, effectively, if I want to. Or I could have this, when I've input my drum part, I could then right-click and do explode channels to tracks. But then what that will do is that will create a whole nother bunch of channels, which I don't want in this particular scenario. You can get rid of all of these if you want and just keep everything on the one channel. But and then you can just do the explode tracks to channels feature. And when you do that, that'll create a whole bunch of extra channels in the mixer for you. And then you can have those as your drum channels. So either way, it will work, whichever way round you want to do it. Personally, I quite like this way. And then I just keep one channel for drums up in the event view. And for me, that just keeps things nice and tidy, personally, for me up here when I'm working on the song. And then in the mixer, I've got all the channels that I want. So yeah, I hope that helps you. Kyle says, instrument tracks hold MIDI data, channels are for audio output. Correct. Ronald says, so when I play back the song, I can adjust volume of individual drum sounds. Correct. Absolutely. You can do a proper full drum mix here. You can change all the, you can pan, you can have EQ, you can have reverbs and delay sends, you can have whatever you want on each of these channels. Just Bob says, is this how you'd set up a drum machine or electric drum kit? This might well be how I would set up an electric drum kit. I might well set it up this way. But it depends on the drum machine and it depends upon the electric drum kit. Not everyone is the same and not everyone has the same kind of way of being set up. So yeah, so there you go. I hope that answers that. But that was a great wee bunch of questions there. I like it. I like it very much. We are at the halfway point of the show, folks. Super Squirrel says, sorry, that question was a bad joke in homage to George Clinton's Atomic Dog. I'd forgotten all about that record, I'll tell you that. I had forgotten all about that. I like me a bit of George Clinton for sure. Having grown up with a lot of funk music in my house when I was a kid. Any other questions, folks? Because we are halfway through the show. I'm going to go back up and see if there is anything I have missed. Let's see. Cool. I'm not seeing anything. I'm not seeing anything like a question. Any other questions, folks? Because if we have no more questions, we'll end the show. Louis from Alps Media is here. Louis is awesome. He does a great job of getting everybody who is part of HST, which includes, by the way, Jonny Lipsham Studios. If you're part of what we do here, go talk to Louis if you are after PreSonus gear. That includes memberships of PreSonus Sphere and Studio One, but you know, also PreSonus hardware. If you're after a good deal, go talk to Louis, especially, in fact, probably only if you're in the United States. If you are in North America, talk to Louis, and he will get you a great deal on PreSonus gear, hardware, and software. Because he rocks. And that's kind of the arrangement that we are able to have with him. So yeah, there's that little commercial break. David Anthony is here. Hello, David. Good to see you. Welcome. Can you please explain how the chords of As Tears Go By work? So what do we have? We have G, A, C, and D. How do all the major chords work? I used to not worry about such things. Now that I know a little more. Okay, so I'm assuming that all of those chords are major chords. Am I correct? And I'm also assuming that we are in the key of G. This is not a song I'm familiar with, by the way. So what do we have? We have G. We have A. We have C, and we have D. Yeah, I like those chord changes. So, if we're in the key of G, then G is chord 1, and A would normally be minor, because the G major scale has a C natural rather than a C sharp, so that would make chord 2 minor. But if in this case it is major, that adds in a C sharp, which doesn't belong to the G major scale, but it can definitely sound interesting. It can add a different flavor. It can kind of make it a little bit more bluesy, which is why I kind of went in that general direction, because that to me is what that does if you make chord 2 a major chord. But chord 2 would normally be minor rather than major. So it does do something interesting. Now the interesting thing about chord 2 as a major chord is that it more naturally leads directly to D, because it's the chord 5 in the key of D. So, and there the C sharp acts as a leading tone into the D. Which is why you do hear songs that do this. Now you might recognize the chord changes there to a particular pop song. So essentially that little passage there that I was playing is in D. It's not in G, even though it starts on G. It's in D because this is where that is where the sense of home is for this piece. And what we have here is we have 4, 5, 1. So that's kind of how that can work. It depends on, you know, what your approach is. But yeah, I hope that kind of answers that question. So I hope, David, please do give me a little bit more information about your question so that I can kind of unpack that a little bit more. Ronald says that he's added Studio One to PC and staying in the box. What would be a good PreSonus device to explore for increasing workflow? Don't need a MIDI controller. Well, it depends what you mean by PreSonus device, because there's a lot of different devices that we have. Like there's interfaces, there's mixers, there's Atom SQs, there's the Square Atom, there's the Faderport series, there's all of those. So it depends what you require, really. So it depends what you mean by you're wanting to expand your workflow, and then kind of what you're wanting to do with your workflow. Are you wanting to get a mixer and be a little bit more hands-on, which would be a different kind of a workflow from just using a mouse? If that's the case, then I would certainly recommend something like the Faderport 16 faders, fully motorized, automatable faders inside of Studio One. You're controlling the console just using the faders, and you can control all sorts of other elements actually. So you can do automation with the Faderport, which is actually really, really cool. Doing automation with the Faderport is a fantastic workflow. Or you could get a Studio Live mixer, which you could use as an interface, as a live mixer, and as a DAW controller as well, a little bit like the Faderport. I have the Studio Live mixers sat in front of me right here. I have the 32SC, which is basically in a 16-channel chassis, basically, and it just means I have 16 faders, and I can do automation, I can mix, I can control the panning, I can do all of that from the mixer, and it's just a different, more tactile, hands-on approach to mixing. Plus, I can open up the plugins using the touch screen, which is really, really handy, so I'm not having to use the mouse to kind of go and drag in, obviously you do have to drag in the plugin, but once it's in, opening the plugin and editing the parameters in that plugin can all be done entirely from the mixer, which is another really useful workflow. Okay, so David says, yes, Major, the Rolling Stones, there is a chorus too, but I thought you would know the song. I don't actually, I have to admit. That's not one of theirs that I'm familiar with. I know a few Rolling Stones songs, but not many. They're not really a band I ever really got into, particularly. Because growing up, really, I grew up listening to Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie and John Coltrane, but I also listened to Weather Report and Steps Ahead and the Brecker Brothers and funk and fusion bands like that, as well as the bebop stuff that Miles Davis and Coltrane stuff that I listened to when I was a kid as well. So I didn't really get into rock and roll until much later in life. Maybe not until really into my 30s did I really start listening to bands like the Beatles and Rolling Stones and groups like that. My mother is a big Beatles fan because she actually knew them personally. Because she, when she was in her late teens and into her early 20s, she lived in Liverpool, and she was in the Cavern Club as a backing singer quite regularly. And before the Beatles were famous, before they before they were even a group named the Beatles, they were a group, and they would play lots of R&B and soul and that kind of thing. And my mum sang with them as a backing vocalist. And this was in the days before Ringo was even in the band. They had Pete Best as their drummer at the time. And they weren't even called the Beatles. They had a completely different name back then. So she knew John and Paul and George really well. And then latterly, I think she met Ringo once Ringo had joined the band, and then they became the biggest band in the world, basically. And I don't think Paul would ever remember my mother. Probably. I think she would. I think if they met, if they met now, he'd probably say, "Oh, I remember you being a backing vocalist," but that's probably as far as it would go, I would think. So she was a big Beatles fan, still is a big Beatles fan, and a big John Lennon fan. I never really got into it, to be honest. I kind of got it. The Quarrymen, that's what they were called. Thank you, Keith. The Quarrymen. I couldn't remember the name of it. But yeah, I never really got into it until much later in life. In actual fact, I didn't really get into the Beatles until I met Jonny Gibe. Jonny Gibe actually got me listening much more deeply to the Beatles than kind of passively, which is what I had done for most of my life. Just, yeah, okay, the Beatles are on. Now I started listening much more closely to their music, and actually realizing there's a whole host of influences and elements to their music that I hadn't really thought about. You know, a lot of different ingredients that made up their sound, which made them really unique. Hadn't really thought about it, to be honest. Poppy Booth says, can I put two fader port 8s in line? I know you can do 8 and 16 together, but I don't know about two 8s. I believe you can. I would think if you can do an 8 and a 16, you could probably do two 8s. I would think. Ronald says, so could I keep the arranger open and have access to faders without having them on the screen? Yeah. Well, I mean, I have the mixer indoor mode at the moment and all the faders for what we're looking at here. Let me go back to this to Studio One. So I have the console view open here, but if I close that console view, the faders don't drop down. The faders are still there. I can still move them. Right? So let me just move all these about into a different configuration. Just out of sheer interest, and let's open it. Now, you can see all of those faders are now in completely different positions. But I did it without the console view being open on the screen. So you don't have to have the console view open in order to work in DAW mode. On the mixer or on the fader port. Okay, the connection is continuous. As indicated by this little arrow here. So if I open the MIDI monitor, you can see all of this stream of data that is constantly coming in all the time, and it's given as a description as clock. And if I go all the way over here, you can see that it's MIDI input coming in, and this means that my fader port, because I have the fader port V2, the single fader port black one, and I have the mixer in DAW mode. All of that is coming in, and of course I have my Yamaha MIDI controller here. You can see no on, no off there. So all of this is continuous data that's coming into the MIDI monitor. So the connection is constant. You don't have to have the mixer open. So let's change the mixer up again. There we go. And there, you can see it's all completely different. All right. So I hope that helps answer that one. Just Bob says, your parents also had a pretty big hit in the 60s as well, right? Your mum sang backups and your dad wrote music for the song, correct? Not with the Beatles, no. My parents never recorded with the Beatles. However, they were involved in the 10cc record on which they had the big hit, I'm Not in Love. They were both involved in that. And my mother's wordless vocals are in the background of that massive hit. And basically what they did was they had everybody that was there in the studio do, I think, it might have been 8 or 10, I can't remember, 8 or 10 notes and 8 or 10 parts. So everybody did that. So all the band members did it. And my mother did a whole layer, and then basically what they did was they loaded all of those loops, because they were tape loops, they loaded them all onto the mixer, and then live, they did this live, they had one shot at it, they played the mixer like it was a piano. So they would bring up certain faders to play one chord, they bring up the next set of faders to play the next chord, and so on, and that's how they did those voices. Which is why those voices sound a little bit weird, because they're all people's different voices kind of mixed together Some of them were played a little bit faster than others, and some are a little bit slower than others. So you get this kind of chorusing effect, which is not done using a chorus effect. It's just the way the audio artifacts on the tape loops happened. So my mother is on there. She did a whole bunch of loops effectively. And then, like I say, they played the console like it was a piano, bringing up chords, bringing down chords, and everybody was on the mixer, my dad included. He had a bunch of faders under his fingers to bring up a particular chord, and they had to do it in one take because it was going straight to a 2-channel tape machine out of the console. That's how that song was made. It's phenomenal. It's amazing. That's how they did it. But yeah. But yeah, my mum and dad were dating when my mother was kind of doing bits and pieces of backups with the Quarrymen, as they were. But they weren't married at that point. But by the time they got to doing the 10cc stuff, they were married, and I was not yet born. Let's see, what else do we have? Kingston Dread is here, all the way over in the Caribbean. I think, Kingston, if I recall, you are in Jamaica, if memory serves. I think you've mentioned it before that you reside in Jamaica. I think that's right. Which is one of my favorite of the Caribbean islands, by the way. Beautiful place. Beautiful place. So Ronald says, if I get a fader port 8, can I switch from channel 1 to 8 and 9 to 16 on the fly? Well, you've got your 8 faders and you've got a page button, and you can, I think it's a page button, which basically allows you to switch between one set of 8 and another set of 8 faders. So yeah, you can pretty much do that. I don't have a fader port 8. I know Jonny does, so Jonny Guy would probably be the best person to answer that question. But yeah, pretty much, I think that is the case. You can do that, for sure. Alright, I need more tea. Ember is here. He says that the Personas forum's down. Yes, they are. The Personas forum is off at the moment. I don't know why. I have raised the flag to the IT guys, and they are working on it. I don't know what has happened. I don't know how long it'll take to fix. It could be tomorrow before it's up and running again. Not quite sure why it's gone down. But it'd be interesting to see if the knowledge base is working, actually, because those two are a little bit closely linked. So let's go support, and let's go here, and let's go to the getting started section. Okay, so the knowledge base is working. Knowledge base is working fine. That works. So I can get to the knowledge base just fine, and I'm just going to check support ticket. Yes, Persona support is working, so we're all good. We're all good from that point of view. Let's see, anything else? Carl says the receptionist did the Big Boys Don't Cry vocal. Yes, that is correct. That is correct. Mostly, I think, because that was they did that as a replacement for a vocal that didn't cut, which is why they ended up getting the receptionist to do it, because all the session singers were gone. And they realized that that line had not cut properly, so they got the receptionist to replace it. And the interesting thing about that is I don't think the receptionist was ever actually credited I don't think many of the session musicians that came in and made that record what it is with all of those vocal loops were ever credited. My mother and my dad were there. They got their session fees, and I don't think they are credited anywhere on the liner notes for the record, which is very disappointing, because that song became a monster hit, and my parents made nothing out of it. Unfortunately, but I guess that's just the way things worked back then. If you were a session musician, you played what you were told to play, and you got your fee, and that was it. You didn't really get a credit unless you were a super duper famous session musician, somebody like Steve Gadd. His name would absolutely be in the liner notes for sure, but he probably only would have got a session fee and would not have got like a percentage of royalties. I doubt, highly doubt it. But yeah, I'm not 100% sure about that. But yeah, that's pretty much how things worked back then. If you're a session musician, you got your fee and that was it. All right, we have 3 minutes left, so I will take one more question. One more question. One more question. There you go. That is how you completely murder a Phil Collins song and make it mean something completely different. Let's see. Do we have anything else? I'm not seeing any other questions. But we got some good ones tonight. We got some good questions. And Just Bob had a good question. And David's question about the chord changes to that Rolling Stones song is interesting. Good one. Good one. All right, you got 2 minutes left. 2 minutes to get the last question in. No show next week. That is correct, because it would fall on Christmas Day, and Christmas Day is an important time for everybody to have family time. So I do not want to invade your family time on Christmas Day. So no show next week, but there will be. I'm assuming Johnny Gibe is happy for me to be kind of preemptively announcing this. There will be Songwriting Simplified on the 28th. Pretty sure that is okay with him. If it's not okay with him and he's going to be otherwise occupied, I will do the show on my own. I don't mind doing that. And then there will be a New Year's Eve special. My Hogmanay special will happen on the 31st. So if you guys are up for hanging out for an hour on Hogmanay, aka New Year's Eve, we'll do that. I've been doing that every year for the last 5 or 6 years. So it would be great if we get a good turnout for that. So the next show will be Songwriting Simplified next Wednesday, and then on the Sunday, which will be New Year's Eve, we will do the Hogmanay special then. So there you go. So no show next week because it will be Christmas Day, and I think everybody would have by then had plenty to drink. I might have had plenty to drink. How much wood can a woodchuck chuck if he only has a violin and a sharp bagpipe? Yeah. Sharpened bagpipes. Sharpened bagpipes can be dangerous. You can seriously, give somebody a serious problem with a sharpened bagpipe. For sure. You could do some serious damage. I wouldn't recommend. Anyway, I think we are done. What is the meaning of life? John Lake asked. This is the last question of the night. The meaning of life is, of course, 42. Everybody knows that. So if you don't know that, John, shame on you. I'm kidding. All right, folks. I will see you all on Wednesday for Songwriting Simplified for this week, which will be on the 21st. And then, as I said, no Christmas show, no show on Christmas Day, but we will do Songwriting Simplified on the 28th, and then we will have the Hogmanay show on the 31st. So that's going to be the shows that I'm going to be involved in for the rest of 2022. So until then, folks, I will bid you a very good night. And I need to find my music for the end. I'm sure you probably don't want to hear that slightly weird version of Silent Night again, so I will go back to my regular music, and I'll bid you all a very good night. Good night. And yes, Billy is absolutely right. New Year's Eve is a Saturday, so the Hogmanay show will be Saturday, 31st. Be there, 6 p.m. Central Time. Good night.